Steel containers slam onto rail cars in Prince Rupert, British Columbia. Lithium cell pallets stack silently in Sonora. The trucks don't stop at United States Customs. They never enter the country. Canada and Mexico, once junior partners in America's North American project, are mid-operation, carving a $120 billion trade corridor that cuts directly around the United States. Not by protest, by precision. The trigger? A letter, signed in thick black ink by President Donald Trump. It promised a 35% tariff on Canadian goods and 30% on Mexican imports. Necessary for American security, the administration claimed. But the result was a breach. Not just economic, but structural. And it's spreading fast. Canada's Mark Carney didn't issue a counter-threat. He took a meeting with Claudia Sheinbaum, Mexico's newly elected president. The two agreed to shift from trilateral dependence to bilateral sovereignty. Their solution wasn't a treaty. It was a rail line, a blockchain system, and a cross-border logistics chain that excluded Washington entirely. The corridor, called the Northern Intercontinental Supply Link, reroutes high-value trade through three mechanisms. First, rail from Monterrey to British Columbia. Second, a customs integration system using encrypted bilateral declarations. And third, port-to-port shipping via Pacific and Gulf lanes. Every ton moved avoids United States inspection, taxation, and authority. In 2024, $756 billion in North American goods crossed the U.S. border. Of that, $138 billion was processed as what's called hub trade, cargo that merely passed through the U.S. for roading. This new corridor slices directly into that $138 billion pipeline. The initial goal? Divert $69 billion by 2026. Detroit, long the beating heart of North American vehicle assembly, is about to flatline. Under the old model, battery modules from Mexico and nickel from Canada pass through U.S. soil for finishing. Now, under the new plan, they skip Indiana and Michigan entirely, connecting directly in Ontario and Baja. The U.S. Department of Commerce reports that every 10,000 EVs produced supports 3,000 indirect jobs, with Canada and Mexico set to jointly produce 360,000 EVs annually via this corridor. That's 108,000 jobs displaced, not overseas, but across a border that used to be open. Mark Carney secured $2.3 billion in infrastructure modernization at Prince Rupert Port. Mexico followed suit with 27 billion pesos for Sonora Durango road and terminal expansion. These aren't provisional moves. They're permanent installations, sunk cost signals that the corridor is here to stay. Let's stop pretending this is about tariffs. This is about irrelevance. The United States wrote the original NAFTA playbook. Now it's being excluded from the sequel, and the rewrite isn't driven by animosity. It's driven by efficiency. The contradictions multiply. Trump sought to isolate China with 50% steel tariffs, but Chinese exports, blocked at United States ports, are now redirected to Canada, then processed and shipped south to Mexico. The United States firewall is forcing global flows around it. Sheinbaum, in a press briefing, confirmed what Washington hadn't anticipated. We are no longer looking for permission. We are designing systems that can't be vetoed. Carney echoed that with an invitation to Mexico, bypassing G7 formalities entirely. Sovereignty, they argue, isn't confrontation. It's design. Digitized customs declarations between the two countries allow for encrypted manifest tracking without U.S. knowledge or approval. This is the first major corridor to digitally detach from U.S. customs and border protection. It's not an alliance. It's a protocol. And the corridor brings a benefit Washington can't replicate: green supply chain certification. Because both countries are integrating wind and solar logistics, European regulators are labeling the corridor as climate compliant. That label exempts the goods from Brussels carbon border taxes. The U.S. route penalized. Every kilometer rerouted slices revenue from U.S. highways. Arizona and Texas alone are projected to lose $4 billion annually in toll income. Buffalo, once a critical transshipment hub, faces a 27% decline in east-west cargo volume, per Great Lakes Freight Authority data. And the backlash is human, not just fiscal. Border towns like Sault Ste. Marie and Blaine are losing Canadian tourists. In June alone, car crossings fell by 33%, marking the 6th month of consecutive decline. Not because of protest, but honestly, just due to fatigue. For families who've owned cabins in Vermont for generations, the choice is painful. But yeah, many are selling. Not out of anger, but more out of a sense that the border is no longer a bridge. It's a checkpoint. In Maine, Quebecer Harold White canceled his annual vacation after 62 years. He told CBC, "I didn't feel insulted. I felt erased. This isn't diplomacy anymore. It's dignity." Meanwhile, Carney isn't waiting around for U.S. apologies. He's signing long-term deals with Hydro-Quebec, indigenous equity groups, and green energy firms to really fortify Canada's export spine. He doesn't want to punish Washington. He wants to outgrow it. The new Canada-Mexico corridor brings per-ton shipping costs down to $68, while the U.S. route still sits at $102. Even if Trump cancels the tariffs tomorrow, logistics economics won't just shift back. The bypass isn't temporary, it's simply cheaper. Export Development Canada's financial commitment runs through 2028. Bankimex's pledges run deeper. These projects aren't reactions. They're foundations. And the more they solidify, the more the United States becomes a third wheel in what used to be a triangle. At the G7 summit, Carney told Sheinbaum, "We'll build without drama." The irony? That drama began in the Oval Office, and it's now writing a new economic map where the United States isn't in the legend. Here's the sharpest twist yet. This corridor will cost the United States more than it ever made from NAFTA in its first 4 years. The 5-year projected loss? $245 billion. The gains from NAFTA from 1994 to 1998? $221 billion. California's grid operator released a quiet report. Electricity prices will rise $3.1 billion annually due to Canada diverting LNG to Mexico. The Manzano pipeline skips the Golden State entirely. Trump's wall just hit the power grid. And the White House is cornered. Reverse the tariffs and look weak. Keep them and cement the corridor. But here's what's already happened. The logistics brain trust has moved on. Supply chain directors are calling it, well, a risk-free lane. Orders are shifting. Warehouses in Ohio are losing contracts to new depots in Mazatlan and British Columbia. Even if the political rhetoric calms, the contracts don't rewind. U.S. allies like Japan and Germany are now expressing interest in the corridor as a North American foothold without U.S. involvement. That's not a trade win. That's a sovereignty retreat. The United States hoped tariffs would centralize control. Instead, they inspired decentralization. And, the continent's 2 other anchors, once deferential, are now leading. So what is this, really? Is it a rebellion, or maybe a correction? Or perhaps a revelation that dependency was never mutual? Carney and Sheinbaum's alliance doesn't need the White House's blessing. It only needed its provocation. From clean energy flows to lithium routes to digital customs chains, the corridor is no longer just a plan. It's a parallel system. And honestly, Washington's biggest trade weapon, access, is becoming less valuable by the hour. So, what happens next? Even if the tariffs are rolled back, the new standard has, really been set: regional trade autonomy without American mediation. The USMCA isn't dead. It's just been outpaced. The final irony? Trump's signature, meant to assert power, actually authorized the very divorce he was trying to prevent. That letter wasn't leverage. It was, in fact, liberation. The corridor launches officially in September. By then, early shipments will, begin. By 2026, the plan is to absorb $120 billion annually in diverted trade. Not theoretical, not aspirational. Operational. So, when history asks how the United States lost control of the North American supply grid, the answer won't be war or betrayal. It'll be, overreach. The continent isn't being redrawn with borders. It's being redrawn with data, shipping containers, and, honestly, silence. This is how empires aren't toppled, but outmaneuvered. And if the United States wants to rejoin the center, it may no longer find one. Because Canada and Mexico didn't walk away. They built a door. We're glad you're enjoying this video. Please like and subscribe. And hey, check out another video that is now on your screen.